The mushroom trial is over and the jury have found Erin Patterson guilty of murder and attempted murder. Laura, you were in court. What did you see?
I was seated right in front of the dock, only a few metres away from Erin. The jury came into the room and the judge's associate asked them for their verdicts. One by one, the jury forewoman said guilty. I looked at Erin. She sat expressionless. She didn't cry. There was no expression whatsoever.
There's a lot of media outside Latrobe Valley Law Courts at the moment, all waiting to speak to anyone who will come out. Erin Patterson's friend, Ali Pryor, did not say anything. Neither did the Pattersons' media advisor, Jess O'Donnell.
We don't know the next time Erin will be in court, but soon she will have to face a plea hearing before she is sentenced.
But let's head back to the studio and discuss it in more depth. I'm Brooke Grebert-Craig.
I'm Laura Placella.
And this is The Mushroom Cook. Hi Laura, we're back in our podcast studio. So Erin Patterson has been found guilty. What does this mean?
So she's been found guilty of 3 charges of murder relating to Don Patterson, Gail Patterson and Heather Wilkinson. And she's also been found guilty of the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson. And it has been a long time in Victoria since we've had someone been found guilty of a triple murder, especially a female. So this is quite a big moment. And what this also means is that the jury have rejected her story that this was a tragic accident. They didn't buy it. They heard all of the evidence that we're about to go through and they concluded that she deliberately put death caps in that meal with the intention of killing all of her guests.
And Laura, I guess for the last 30 episodes, we broke down the evidence for our listeners and we had to be quite careful in what we were saying. I guess now we can be a bit more candid.
Yeah, for sure. When you're covering a trial, there are a lot of rules that you have to follow. And we're not going to go into all the law now. But in this point in time, since we have a verdict, we can speak a bit more freely about the evidence and what it means. I know some of our listeners were really wanting us to talk more about the evidence. They wanted to hear our analysis of it. And that makes sense. You know, people who are really interested in the trial wanted all of those things really broken down and explained to them. But now we're in a position where we really can start to analyse the evidence and see how the jury came to the verdict that they did.
Okay, Laura, now let's talk about the 7 most damning pieces of evidence that brought down Erin.
And these are the pieces of evidence that we think brought her down. We're actually not sure what happened in that jury room. We're not privy to the discussions the jurors had. But these are certainly the pieces of evidence that I think stuck out in both of our minds when we were listening to it, and probably in our listeners' minds when we were bringing it to them as well.
I think the first one would definitely have to be the different coloured plates and the individual beef Wellingtons that Erin cooked for her guests.
I think the coloured plates was almost like the smoking gun for some people. They just couldn't wrap their head around why you would invite people over to your house for a lunch and then proceed to serve the meals on different plates. Why wouldn't you just use a matching set of plates that you had?
So Ian Wilkinson, as we've touched on many times before, was the only guest that survived the meal. And he said that Erin served their beef Wellingtons on stone grey plates, but served herself on an orange tanned plate. He also said the morning after the lunch, Heather remarked, "Is Erin short of crockery? I was wondering why she served herself on a different plate to the rest of us." So here's 2 people with the same account of Erin serving her guests on different colour plates compared to herself.
And during the trial, Erin's defence barrister, Colin Mandy, tried to argue that it would have been really dumb for her to use different coloured plates if she was trying to commit a murder. He said it would have been so much smarter for her to just mark the pastry. But it seems like the jury wasn't buying that argument and they've taken Ian at his word.
And another point is Erin cooked individual beef Wellingtons for her guests rather than cooking up a usual beef Wellington log.
We learnt that Erin used the best-selling Recipe Tin Eats cookbook called Dinner, and there were photos in that recipe of the log you've just described. So it didn't really make sense that someone would follow a recipe, one that she's actually never made before. Erin admitted she'd never made a beef Wellington, but make such a massive change to the recipe. And I guess now we have our answer why she decided to do that. Crown prosecutor Nanette Rogers said to the jury that it was the prosecution case that she served individual beef Wellingtons so she could have complete control of all the ingredients in all the serves. And what we can take away from the jury's verdict is that they agree that her serve of beef Wellington must either have had no mushrooms at all or just regular mushrooms.
Now let's move on to the fabricated cancer claim. And this is a little bit complex, right, Laura?
Yeah, it is a little bit. When Erin gave evidence during the trial, she had a whole range of reasons why she was telling people she had medical issues and trying to explain away why she would announce at the table that she had cancer when she really didn't. So Simon told the jury that when he was invited to the lunch 2 weeks earlier, Erin did flag that she wanted to discuss some important medical news. But it was only until the day of the lunch, obviously Simon didn't attend, but it was at the end of the meal that Ian recalled Erin making an announcement.
Yes, he said that Erin said that she had cancer and she described it as life-threatening.
And he said in court that that was the moment he realised why they had been invited to the lunch, because the 4 guests weren't told that Erin wanted to discuss medical news. She only told that to Simon.
So the prosecution very much claimed that Erin planted this seed of this lie far in advance when she told Don and Gail earlier in June that she was having medical tests on her elbow.
But this is where I felt like it became a bit confusing, because with Don and Gail, she was talking to them about this lump, and then all of a sudden at the lunch, she starts bringing up ovarian cancer. Seems like she dialed things up to 10 during that conversation. But she claimed that she'd only ever brought up cancer at the lunch because she was exploring gastric bypass surgery and she wanted a cover for that procedure when it came time for her to go under the knife. Mr. Mandy made a good point during his closing address that she didn't tell the lunch guests about the medical news and they seemed to just come to the lunch with no reason at all provided. And then she served them the beef Wellington and they ate it before she even told them about the cancer. So I'm not quite sure myself if she really did manufacture this story about cancer to get them to the lunch. It seems like they would have come regardless.
And you know, I've seen a lot of questions floating around as to why then Heather and Ian were invited to the lunch, and I think it's quite safe to say that there were really collateral damage in Erin's plans.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. It did appear that Erin really wanted Simon at the lunch. And it also appeared that she thought the best chance of that happening would be to have both his parents there and also his aunt and uncle. I think the term I'd used before with you, Brooke, is safety in numbers. If there are 5 people sitting around that table plus Erin, I think in everyone's minds it would have been a lot less likely that something awful would have happened.
Now let's chat about Erin's lack of symptoms. I think it's safe to say that she wasn't really sick at all, despite the jury hearing that she had diarrhea the day after the lunch.
Yeah, it almost seems now that some of the lies she told on the stand were for nothing, because they were actually pretty embarrassing lies. She told the jury, and I'd go on to say the world at large, considering how many people have been following this case, that she had to pull over on the side of the road the day after the lunch and essentially take a poo in the bush. And then she spoke about cleaning herself up and then spoke about having to drive to a service station to get rid of those soiled tissues. So no one would really want to be recounting any of this, but it seems now that that was just a lie.
I know this wasn't really mentioned in court a lot, but it's something we all as journalists spoke about in court and in the overflow room. Why did Erin wear white pants the day after the lunch if she had explosive diarrhea?
And we really, really wanted the prosecution to make this point in their closing address when they were touching on the trip to Tyab. We were just waiting. We're like, mention the white pants, mention the white pants. They didn't get mentioned, but you never know. This could have been something that the jurors could have been discussing themselves. When you are having one of those days, you're not wearing white pants just in case you do have an accident, which Erin was talking to people about. She was talking about the fact she was scared over the night of the lunch and the next day that she could have an accident. I think the word she used at one point was hoping sitting in the car would feel like a cork. So this was something clearly on her mind, or so she said. It appears the night of and the next day, she wasn't really suffering from anything. But I think you've mentioned to me before, Brooke, that you felt like maybe she started to get stressed by the Monday.
Yeah, I definitely think that would have been the case. And, you know, we heard that she went to the hospital and she had tests done of her bowel movements. And personally, I do think, when you're under so much pressure and anxiety, it can really force your body to do things that you're not really used to.
Well, yeah, I mean, essentially, in those days after the lunch, things were unravelling for Erin. I think she was starting to realise that there was a chance she was going to get found out. And I can imagine that would have been incredibly stress-inducing and anxiety-inducing. So she gets to the hospital on July 31, the Monday. She gets taken to Monash Medical Centre. Pretty quickly, they realise that she's not suffering from death cap mushroom poisoning. But another thing here that we haven't touched on yet was the fact that Erin told the jury that she vomited after the lunch. But very interestingly, and it makes sense now, she didn't tell anyone else that she vomited after the lunch. It appears that it was a story she concocted to explain to the jury why she wasn't as sick as everyone else.
And I think this is a difficult issue to actually speak upon. In any other case, obviously when someone is suffering body image and bulimia, you would want to believe them. But I think in Erin's case, she has proven that she is a liar. So really, did she suffer from bulimia? Did she vomit on that day? Who knows? We don't know, and clearly the jury didn't believe her.
I must admit it was a very convenient lie, and one it appears that no one really saw coming. But I think they did a very good job of proving to the jury that it was nothing but a baseless lie.
Now let's move on to the citizen website iNaturalist, which we have spoken a lot in detail, and Erin's phone pings to Outram and Locke.
And this is probably one of my favourite parts of the evidence because it really sets out a very compelling timeline. And when I heard about this timeline for the first time, I just couldn't ignore it. I just kept coming back to it and how incriminating I thought it was. So we have spoken a lot about these dates before, but I'll really try and do it now in a way that I think will really make sense. So April 18 is the day that Christine McKenzie posts on iNaturalist and says she's found death caps in Locke. 10 days later, we now know that Erin travelled to the area and foraged for death caps. Only a few hours after she's in Locke, she is at Better Home Living in Leongatha buying a dehydrator.
Crazy.
Only a few hours. She'd found what she was looking for, and then she's thought, I need to preserve these, because we heard from mycologist Dr. Tom May that death caps, after they've been picked, they only have a certain shelf life before they will start to decompose. So she thought to herself, I need to buy something to help me preserve my eventual murder weapon. So she gets the dehydrator, then she comes home. Then 2 days later, she takes some photos of her dehydrator, including some photos of some button mushrooms on one of the trays. And this was a really smart argument, I thought, from the prosecution. They said that Erin was doing a test run. She was practicing with just some regular Woolies mushrooms to try to figure out the best way to dehydrate a mushroom, because she wouldn't want to stuff it up. You know, we heard evidence in the trial that death caps had never before been posted to iNaturalist in the Gippsland region. So I think she was probably thinking, this is really rare. I want to make sure I don't waste these. And then a few days later, she takes some more photos. And this time it appears that those photos were of the death caps sitting on her dehydrator tray. So she had done her test run with the button mushrooms and she was ready to dehydrate the real thing.
But it's really crazy to me that she would take photos of this.
Yeah, and this was something Mr. Mandy did point out. He goes, if my client has been planning this murder, why on earth is she taking photos of, again, the murder weapon? Not only the mushrooms, but the dehydrator itself. So that was a little bit strange, I will say. But someone did actually tell me that they thought she had taken the photos as trophy photos. She may not have thought she'd get caught, and they'd actually offer almost a little keepsake of what she was able to find and what she was able to do with those mushrooms. So it seems like Erin waits a few weeks, and perhaps she thinks, I want more death caps. I don't have enough. So she then travels to Locke, where she first went to see if any more death caps were growing, before she travels to Outram after seeing Dr. May's post that he had posted only 1 day beforehand. Mr. Manny almost mocked the prosecution case during his closing address, saying that it was extraordinary to suggest that Erin would have been sitting there refreshing iNaturalist every day, but it appears with this verdict that the jury has ruled that that's exactly what she did.
And we touched upon the dehydrator a bit before, but Erin did dump it on August 2, so this was 4 days after the lunch. And in her evidence, Erin said that she dumped it because she panicked, but I think it's safe to say that it wasn't so much panic, but more that Erin was getting rid of the evidence, getting rid of her murder weapon.
She knew that she had used the dehydrator to dry death caps, and she's really into true crime. She was probably thinking to herself, if they find this dehydrator in my home, they're going to run tests on it, and they might find traces of death caps in there. So I'm just going to distance myself from this appliance, dump it, and hope no one finds it. But police were onto it very quickly. I think they found it within only 2 days of her dumping it.
Now let's move on to the Asian grocer and the lies that Erin told about this. So we heard during the trial that she told almost a dozen witnesses that mushrooms in the beef Wellington came from a local Woolworths and an Asian grocer in Melbourne southeast. And she was throwing around different suburbs like Clayton, Oakley, Mount Waverley. But really, she did this to send the Department of Health on a wild goose chase, because she, in fact, did not buy any mushrooms from any Asian grocer in Melbourne southeast.
Yeah, these poor Asian grocers became scapegoats almost. In the days after the lunch, she was starting to realise that she needed to deflect blame. She needed to come up with a story to explain why death caps were in the meal she cooked. I think she cottoned on pretty fast that no one would believe her if she said she just bought the mushrooms from Woolworths. So she needed another element. And we do know that she did shop at these sorts of Asian grocers before, so they probably popped into her mind and she's like, great, I'm going to throw them under the bus. But during the trial, things kind of took a turn, and when Erin was giving evidence, she then all of a sudden revealed that when she was cooking the mushroom duxelles for the beef Wellington, she had gone to her pantry to grab a container of the dried mushrooms from the Asian grocer. She explained that she threw them in. But then she said that after a few days, she realised that maybe that container also had foraged mushrooms in there. So by this stage, Erin's story had evolved from only Woolworths mushrooms being in the meal to Woolworths mushrooms plus dried mushrooms from an Asian grocer to finally, in its final evolution, Woolworths mushrooms plus dried mushrooms from an Asian grocer plus foraged mushrooms that she had accidentally put into this container after one of her foraging trips.
And, you know, I think she really had to add in that element of the foraged mushrooms because she knew that she would be caught out for lying about Asian grocers. I think we have to consider if there were death cap mushrooms at Asian grocers, why didn't anyone else get sick in Victoria?
It really did seem like Erin was hedging her bets because she was trying to leave open the possibility that maybe the death caps did come from the Asian grocer, or maybe she had accidentally foraged death caps. When it came to her trying to spin this story about it being an accident, I don't think she wanted to just lock herself in to one source of mushrooms. She wanted to give herself as many options as possible.
And really create that doubt within the jury.
But again, they really didn't buy it.
Now let's finish off with something that we've dubbed the game of phones.
Our producer was really happy with that phrase, and it's a really good one, and it really describes what was going on here. So we have phone A, phone B, and phone C. We won't crap on about them too much more, but essentially what this verdict really shows was that phone A, which was Erin's usual phone, was disposed of by Erin at some stage. We don't know where she put it.
She wanted to get rid of that evidence.
Yeah, she really did. The prosecution had always argued that that was probably the phone she used to search iNaturalist. It was the phone she took to lock an outram, considering that there were those phone pings. So it was very likely that she is looking on her phone at iNaturalist, trying to figure out what tree did Dr. May say the death caps are under. It's almost like her guide. So she's gotten rid of phone A, but then she's thought to herself, when the police come knocking, which I think she realised they would, she needed a dummy phone. So she had a lot of devices, it seemed, laying around her house. So she's grabbed phone B and she started to set it up to appear like it's her phone. She's done that around August 2, August 3. By August 5, they do come knocking and she's probably thinking, great, I'm prepared now. She has to pull a little bit of a sneaky and take out her SIM card from phone A, her usual phone. I don't think she wanted to lose her number, so she's taken out her SIM card, hidden phone A somewhere in the house, at least for now, and then she's just handed over phone B to police and said, yep, this is my phone. Here, you can have it. But maybe panic took over in that moment because she's then gone and factory reset phone B 2 times. It may have been panic and she's just thought, maybe I'll just, wipe my dummy phone for the sake of it. Or maybe she thought wiping the dummy phone would delay police a little bit. Maybe they wouldn't actually realise that that wasn't her phone until later when they got back to police HQ. So again, we go back to this Game of Phones idea.
I think this really speaks to Erin's level of sophistication, really. She was really thinking ahead and planning out her moves.
Yeah, that's right. And when she was giving evidence, she actually had some explanations to the switching of the phones that I must admit at some points did seem to make a bit of sense. She said that police didn't touch one of the phones in her house and left it on a windowsill. And she claimed that was phone A. Clearly no one was buying that. And then she also argued that she was simply setting up phone B because phone A was for some reason damaged despite being 6 months old. And she also wanted to get a new phone number. But I think, if you've served up a lunch that is about to claim the lives of almost all of your guests, I don't think that is the time you're setting up a new phone. It would be the last thing on your mind, really. But in this case, Erin was spending those days trying to figure out a way to get away with murder.
So now that Erin has been found guilty of murder, she will be taken back to a women's maximum security prison, Dame Phyllis Frost. But Laura, what's next? Can she appeal?
So she can appeal. But before that can happen, there are a few final stages that she needs to undergo in the trial process. So here in Victoria, someone is found guilty of a serious crime. They will face what's called a plea hearing. The word plea sometimes confuses people. Sometimes people think that means they've pleaded guilty, but it's just what the hearing is called. But effectively, it's when the prosecution will present their arguments to the judge about how long they think she should spend in jail. They'll put forward some aggravating factors as well, things they say that makes this crime really bad and really heinous. But then on the flip side, the defence will get a chance to argue why she should spend a little bit less time in jail. They're likely to commission many psychiatric reports about Erin and they'll go into her past. And then after that, after those arguments are had, the judge will go away and think about the sentence he will hand down. This is Justice Christopher Beale. And then she'll be back to court for sentencing.
And when do you reckon we'll get a sentence?
This whole process could take a number of months. Like I mentioned before, there are psychiatric reports that might need to be completed. So it could be potentially 6 months until she is sentenced. But in Victoria, murder carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. And Erin isn't just facing 1 count of murder. She's facing 3 plus the attempted murder of Ian. So I don't have a crystal ball. I can't sit here and say exactly what she will be sentenced to, but it is very likely that Erin will die in prison.
Yes, but that's unless she wins her appeal.
Yeah, so you did ask me that before, Brooke, about the appeals process. That can take even longer. So after Erin is sentenced, she does have that opportunity to appeal, and she can appeal on 2 grounds. So she can appeal her conviction and she can also appeal her sentence. If she goes down the first route, that's her essentially arguing that something has happened in the trial that hasn't been fair. It's not so much her having a go at the jury, but more so them arguing that the trial wasn't run properly. And if that appeal is successful, we could actually potentially have a retrial. The Court of Appeal might rule that this all needs to happen again because Erin didn't get a fair trial the first time. Or she can go down a second route of appealing her sentence to try and get a few years or months shaved off in the hope that she can potentially see the light of day again.
So that's Erin's future, but as for us, we'll be back with a couple more episodes. But in the meantime, for more, go to themushroomcook.com.au.